Good morning. Good morning. So if you're not aware, it's Super Tuesday today. We have Ms. Ryan up here who's going to give a little presentation on Super Tuesday, and then we'll have Q&A after, so if you have any questions about Super Tuesday, you can ask. And then Ms. Borken's going to go up and talk to you about some environmental issues that have been prominent during the campaign season, and then we'll have Q&A after that, and then we'll open the field to Mr. Haas is up here, Mr. Clifford, so if anyone had questions from last week that we didn't get to, you can ask your questions. So let's give it up for Ms. Ryan.
All right, you guys, it is Super Tuesday, super day, very close to spring break. The election season is really getting exciting. So I'm just going to give you some few tips about what's going to happen today. Just so you guys are ready, 7 p.m. is when we will start to get the first returns. So make sure you guys are back in your rooms or wherever you're going to find out the news. So you're ready, 7 p.m. tonight. Okay, to be totally honest, we have kind of a ridiculous and confusing system for nominating our presidential candidates. We spent all this time and money and effort on the Iowa caucuses and the New Hampshire primary. Then the candidates rushed to South Carolina and Nevada. We're now at Super Tuesday, where we have 12 states holding primaries and caucuses, and 7 of the 12 of them are in the South. 1,460 delegates are up for grabs for both the Democrats and the Republicans. If you're following the election, you will hear the political pundits all talking about delegate math. And no, this is not something made up by Mr. Clifford to torture you guys more. The Democrat needs to win 2,383 delegates, and the Republican needs to win 1,237. And by the end of the day today, 20% of the delegates will have been chosen. Momentum matters a great deal, and if someone wins overwhelmingly today, they could effectively sew up the nomination. It's like a snowball rolling down the top of the hill. Once it gets going, it only gets bigger and faster. In fact, no Republican has won Nevada, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, and then gone on to lose the nomination. Trump won all 3 of these, and it's going to be very hard to stop. Clinton already has a very large delegate lead over Sanders. And I'll just show you some quick numbers up on the board here. Okay, so this is for Clinton, and you can see that she has 546 delegates and Sanders has 87. Now, the darker blue are what are called super delegates. Those are unpledged delegates. So those are delegates who they have not won in a primary or a caucus. The light blue are the ones who are pledged that they've won, and those numbers are actually a little bit closer, but superdelegates obviously clearly are breaking in Hillary Clinton's favor. So she needs 2,383, and she's got 546. For the Republicans, as you can see, Trump is in lead with 82, and then Cruz is second, Rubio third, 1716, and the Republican needs 1,237. Okay, so they're still a long way off, but as I said, there are a lot of delegates up today. Okay. Some of America's most popular states, populous states, including New York, California, Ohio, Florida, and Pennsylvania, haven't even voted yet. The Connecticut primary isn't until April 26th. We really don't matter that much, unfortunately. So you can basically see that we will determine who will run for the presidency based on Iowa, New Hampshire, and the American South. By the time you come back from spring break, 48% of the Democratic delegates and 2/3 of the Republican delegates will have been chosen. But I suspect by St. Patrick's Day, we will know who the 2 nominees will be. Barring something crazy from happening, which in this election year very well could happen, the nominees will be Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, especially if they do well today. Thanks.
Good morning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different environmental platforms. I know as you are spending all of your energy and free time choosing which candidate you'll vote for, this is the most important issue. So I just want to make sure you know all of your facts well before you have the opportunity to vote. So there's a really quick history on the environmental platforms. This is probably the most recent bipartisanship area of all of the different topics that we've talked about. The Republicans and the Democrats for a very long time both had very similar views on the environment. Republican Teddy Roosevelt was called the conservation president. He was responsible for a lot of the national park development throughout the country. FDR, a Democrat, developed the Conservation Corps coming out of out of the Great Depression, I'm so sorry. And then Nixon is actually thought to be one of the big environmental presidents as well because of his work with the Clean Air Act. So we've seen both sides of the aisle talk about environmental issues in the same way, but it wasn't really until Reagan in the 1980s that we started to see a split. And a big drive in the split in the environmental issues came out of the idea that we had too much big government, and government was regulating too much, and over the potential impact of environmental regulations on our economy. So I'm going to look at four kind of main areas that the candidates have been talking about. It's not all the environmental areas, but the four big ones they've been talking about. And you'll notice that three of the four have to do with energy. The first one, the biggest one that we've heard the most about, though, is climate change. And so it's no surprise, though, that there's a great divide here. And generally, within the two parties, we see that Democrats are typically supporters and believers that climate change is happening. First, let me just put out there that candidates keep using the word belief. And where they really kind of are in opposition is that Democrats don't believe climate change is a belief. They tend to believe it's a fact. And Republicans tend to think that climate change is a belief system. So you can see that the Democrats tend to say that it's a fact and it's founded in science. Republicans tend to reject that it's happening. Actually, what's really interesting is that the Republican Party as a whole is far more liberal in their thoughts of climate change than actually the candidates project themselves to be. You can see here, I don't know if I have the laser, in this one, in the bottom left, that there actually are a fair amount of Republicans in the red that believe that climate change is happening, that scientists do have founded data. This top graph shows that the Republicans think that the media is exaggerating the extent of climate change, but nonetheless, they don't believe it's all untrue. And then this bottom one here is, do they believe that climate change is really human caused? And you can see that not all the Republicans do not believe that, some Republicans believe that climate change could be human caused. So within the Republican Party, there's actually a lot more diversity than we see in our candidates. Why the Republicans generally denounce climate change is for real reasons. One is they believe that if we start to regulate our emissions levels, which are the leading causes of climate change, that we're potentially hurting our economy. So there's a big economic standpoint. There's also this oppositional politics. They often believe that if you are an environmentalist, you're a liberal, and the liberal thought is in opposition to their views. Of course, religion is no surprise. They tend to believe that the earth is made for humans to use and exploit, especially the evangelical Christian component of the Republican Party. And so the earth is going to be controlled by God, not by us, so we can't screw it up. And then the last part is anti-elitism, that Republicans tend to believe that there is a belief system that's been in place for a long time, and any sort of denouncing of a belief system is showing an elitism that they're not promoting. So let's talk about the particular candidates. You can see, and this will tend to be the same throughout the entire presentation, we're divided mostly by party, but there is some divide within the party over here on the Republican side. Both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton said there really is no debate when it comes to climate change. The other two are a little more split. John Kasich is definitely the most liberal-minded in terms of environmental issues of the party. He's actually flip-flopped a little bit. In the 90s, he stated that man-made climate change is real, but he's now changed his views on that. He's generally the largest environmental supporter on all topics of the Republicans, but this one he's definitely the most unique. And then the four down here, you can see, believe that either it doesn't exist, is not caused by humans, or that there isn't a reason that the U.S. should act. Ben Carson has said that climate debate is distracting and irrelevant to the campaign. Marco Rubio has said that climate action shouldn't be discussed just on a national scale because America is not just a planet. I don't really understand that one, but. And then Donald Trump has also been a little bit flip-floppy as well, because he was a huge supporter of Lisa Jackson, who was the head of the EPA up until 2013, and she was a huge climate scientist, and he gave her great accolades, so people have been curious about where he stands as he's changed his viewpoint a little bit as well. Okay, the second component of their environmental policies that they've talked about has been looking at the EPA, the role of the EPA in environmental policies. Again, it shouldn't be a surprise that there's a big divide between the two parties. Generally, the Democrats believe that there should be a government enforcement and regulation when it comes to environmental policy. The Republicans think the opposite. Cruz has said that he would like to eliminate the Department of Energy. He believes that there's an there's too much regulation, too much enforcement, and that can hurt the economy. Trump has said glowing things about the EPA, like it's the laughingstock of the world and a total disgrace. He's also said things like, we'll be fine with the environment. We can leave the environment alone for a little bit, but you can't destroy businesses. And then finally, Marco Rubio has said, it's okay to consider fixing the environment, but it needs to be done so with a free market, not by government mandates. In terms of renewable energy, we see that the Democrats are in large support of supporting incentives for improving our renewable energy usage. What's actually really interesting and maybe not so clear here is they actually all are in favor of renewable energy technology. It's just the subsidies where they tend to differ. The main reason that they're all mostly in favor of renewable energy supply is because they're all the candidates are looking to have energy independence. No one really wants to rely on another nation for their energy supply, either for political reasons or economic reasons. And so all of the candidates are really interested in pursuing renewable energies because it's something that we could do at home. How we do it is how they differ. So the Democrats have already talked about how they'd like to actually cut subsidies for oil and increase the subsidies for renewables. Hillary is a very big pro-solar. She's also interested in other technologies as well, but she really thinks that in her first 10 years as president, she could have every home in America run off of solar, installing 500 million solar panels. Bernie's really similar, except for that he is also a big wind proponent. He also has a track record of improving renewables. Burlington, Vermont was the first city in the United States to be run off 100% renewables. So he's using that campaign to push his agenda. The other guys really are in favor of pushing the technology, but no greater than pushing the technologies in the non-renewable energy sector. The last big topic is fossil fuel use. And you can see that on this, sorry, it's a little fuzzy, this image on the left, that this is just looking at Democrats, Republicans, and independents on one component of fossil fuel use. Fossil fuels are going to include the use of oil, drilling both here and importing oil from other countries, mining for coal, fracking for natural gas, and the export of our oil as well that we've drilled. So you can see here, this is looking at the Keystone Pipeline, which was very contentious throughout all of Obama's administration. And just in the last 6 months, he has vetoed it. The Keystone Pipeline was a plan to build a long pipeline from Canada and Alaska down to the Gulf of Mexico so that we could mine for shale oil, or drill for shale oil, and drill for oil in areas that are nature preserves and get it to the coast where we could refine it. You can generally see the Republicans kind of stayed the same. They liked the idea of drilling for oil on this continent and having it all homegrown. The Democrats were originally interested, but have definitely, and the independents have leveled or have moved downward in their belief that the Keystone Pipeline would be a good idea. At this point, it's not really a discussion much anymore because Shell Oil, who's the biggest pursuer of drilling for oil in Canada and Alaska, has pulled out. So even though they're still talking a little bit about the Keystone Pipeline, it doesn't really matter because right now there's no country that's actually interested in drilling there. You can see also up here, this is no surprise based on their renewable agenda. And then these five in the Republican Party absolutely want to see a boost in the use of the fossil fuels, but really on a domestic scale. A lot of them are very pro-fracking. Actually, Ted Cruz and John Kasich are both from states that have huge fossil fuel supplies. There's a lot of natural gas from the Marcellus Shale in Ohio, where John Kasich's from, and Ted Cruz has the oil industry. So they've been very vocal about wanting to continue moving the exploration and efficiency use of our fossil fuels. The last thing is just in December, we had a 40-year-old oil export ban, and the Democrats and Republicans actually used it as a chance to negotiate with each other. The Democrats actually are now allowing for oil to be exported outside the U.S. that's been produced here, but that was a negotiation that happened where the Republicans in return are supporting more green energy tax breaks. So Republicans are actually starting to come around a little bit more to providing incentives for renewable, but it's only because they were given the opportunity to start exporting oil. So here are some of the issues that they're not really talking about. I just want to take a second to mention some of these. You can notice that most of it's about energy, but they're being very, very quiet and talking about nuclear. There are only really two candidates that have spoken a little about nuclear. Chris Christie, when he was in the race, was very pro-nuclear. There's actually quite a bit of nuclear in New Jersey. Maybe that explains, no, I'm not going to say anything. But the nuclear discussion has been really kind of hush-hush. In general, you can see, sorry, these are so fuzzy. They look better on my computer. You can see that there's still a slight majority in favor of nuclear across all parties. So this is looking at Democrats and Republicans. It's about 54% or 51% are supporting of nuclear and 43 are opposed. So it wouldn't actually be too dangerous of a topic to discuss, knowing that information, but I think they're really nervous about bringing up something that could make people scared. Donald Trump is the other big promoter of nuclear, and when he was asked about Fukushima in Japan a couple years ago, he said, don't be scared. If a plane goes down, people keep flying. If you go into an auto crash, people keep driving. So we shouldn't be afraid of nuclear because they explode and people keep making nuclear, I guess is what he's trying to say. Rubio, Kasich, and Cruz avoid the topic altogether. Ben Carson's a little bit pro-nuclear, more so than solar or wind. But again, they're such strong economists, they're worried about the cost of nuclear more than anything. The other things that we haven't heard anything about really are water issues, and this is incredibly surprising considering the state of California and their water drought and what's going on in Flint, Michigan. We've heard very, very little about water issues in the United States. We've also heard very little about the collapse of fisheries or fishery managements, and we've hardly heard anything about endangered species. A couple of quick moments, but not much about preserving habitat or biodiversity. Oops. It's my spoiler. So you can see in general that Republicans tend to not care quite as much about the environment as Democrats do. Independents are kind of in the middle. But generally the entire population of the United States thinks that protecting the environment is important and that stricter environmental laws are worth the cost. Now, if you don't agree with any of their positions, you could always vote for Leo after his campaign speech at the Oscars, or my 4-year-old who wrote this at school last week. She's just like her mom. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Do we have any questions? Any questions on the environment? No questions?
Or for any of us.
Oh, great.
Can you talk a little bit about the difference between cap and trade on carbon and taxing carbon?
So the two different programs, there's been, the two programs are cap and trade and carbon tax. With cap and trade, it's kind of like a bunch of jelly beans in a bowl, and if someone digs in their hand into the jelly beans and takes too many, and they want to sell some of those jelly beans to someone else, they can if they're not going to eat all their jelly beans. That's how it works with air emissions for cap and trade. And so it's a economic way of controlling our air pollution. Carbon emission or carbon taxation is that everyone has a certain amount that they can emit to, and once they emit beyond that, they get taxed on it. Both are ways that the government is trying to use economic incentives to prevent polluting. In general, Democrats are very in favor of this. Republicans are opposed to both.
In your slide about climate change, you said that the Republicans don't have any scientific facts against global warming, and well, there are many universities such as MIT, University of Virginia, University of London, University of Paris, who clearly state that climate change made by human beings doesn't exist. Isn't that enough scientific facts? While some of the scientific facts of the Democrats, such as the ISP, have been using manipulated data, is that also a scientific fact?
So I don't think you quite understood exactly what I was saying. I appreciate your point. But what I was saying is that the Republicans tend to be founded in their belief against climate change in 4 other areas. It's not that they don't also think they have scientific proof, but generally people are against climate change or don't believe in climate change because of their religious beliefs, because of the harm that they're worried about in their economy. Actually, you see that most Republicans believe that there is change in the climate, but their reason to not act on it is found mostly in religious and economic beliefs. They're more party beliefs. It's nothing to do with whether or not they don't have science involved or not. It's just that it tends to be members of the party use religion or economics as the reason behind their belief system. In Democratic Party, they typically use science behind their belief system. I'm not saying that either one is right or wrong, it's just that is the root of the belief system in each of the parties. Does that make sense? Okay.
Economic questions, foreign policy questions. Mr. Hawes is trying to hide back there.
This is for Mr. Hawes. It's kind of like a social issue. Now that all military jobs, including like special forces and infantry, are open to women for the sake of equality, do you think women should also have to register for selective service in the draft for equality?
My guess is that's probably going to happen at some point. Obviously, the military's position on the selective service in general is they'd prefer not to have it. They much prefer a volunteer force for the obvious reasons that volunteering makes you more enthusiastic to be a part of it. The draft exists in the unlikely event of some sort of global war that you'd have to mobilize large parts of the population. Whether they actually move to registering women, I could see that happening certainly in the next 10 years. Again, just for equity's sake. You're right. The jobs are open. Why wouldn't everyone register?
No more questions? Well, last chance. Okay, thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause to our presenters.